Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this month's webinar and outlook on the economy, kind of the updates. And this is a little bit of kind of going a little bit deeper on what some of the issues or some of the things we talked about at last month's live webinar, because we had guest speakers. So I didn't speak much because there's only so long everyone can stay in one place. So that being said, thank you very much. I got a lot of questions in advance for those who are watching the recording later. And a couple of housekeeping items for those of you who are new to this. My name is Kristina Kuprina, and I am the Chief Economist and Portfolio Manager at Sequoia Wealth Advisors. And we do these webinars about once a month, approximately, kind of to update on the economy, what's going on, answer your questions. And the intention is that the time you spend either live here now or listening to the recording later is it's useful and valuable information. So the housekeeping item is this: please send your questions. You don't have to wait to see if I'm going to talk about it or not. If I've covered it, I may add a little bit more based on your question, or we can go past it. However, sometimes we get a lot of questions in at the very end and I don't have a chance to cover them. And it's very, very important that, again, this is useful and valuable to you, especially with everything that's going on in the world today. So that being said, we had an unusual number of people register. Don't know if we're coming live, or most likely most people watch the recordings later. Because of that, if you don't have your question answered or a question comes up later and you're watching this recording, do not hesitate. Send out an email. Just send it to the address you got the link from. It'll get to me. I will follow up with you and make sure your question's answered. That being said, I'm going to hop into this and talk a little bit about the biggest question on a lot of people's minds are, what's next? We've had a really, really wild ride over this last month or so, and there's a lot of reasons for it. Some are widely known and talked about in the news, and other things are a little bit kind of behind the scenes and what's happening. So with that being said, kind of start with a little bit of a high level, what happened sort of last month, and a little bit of the whys behind it, and why things have turned around so quickly, at least at this point. And I said, this is going to touch upon a little bit about policy, a little bit about economics. And my other disclaimer I always say is I'm not here to support or take away from anyone's political or social views, simply here to talk about the economics. And I know there's a lot of different ways to see things. So my idea is just, again, kind of keeping this center more facts and data. However, if questions come up about other topics, I'll do my very best to answer them in an economic context. That being said, so obviously last month we had a lot going on with the tariffs, and the market reacted to that. And since this has already happened, I'll just touch upon it on the very highest level, which is sorry, I keep forgetting what he called it, on the Liberation Day speech. The markets reacted very negatively and reacted negatively over the coming weeks. And largely it was just the simple scope of the tariffs and the uncertainty that were surrounding them. In addition to the fact that whether you like them or don't like them, the current president is really loud and says a lot of things in a way that can sometimes create a lot of uncertainty. And so the markets, when they experience uncertainty, they don't like it very much. And their first reaction is to drop, right? Is reaction, it's fear. And I like to use the analogy of my horse. You all know I've got wild Mustangs that we're gentling and riding now most of the time. And that being said, horses are prey animals. As large as they are and as powerful as they are prey animals. So if anything spooks a horse, its first reaction is, bah! And then if it's trained, it'll take a minute and then it'll just go back walking along, right? It's figured out what's happening. But the initial reaction is fear because it's a prey animal. The market's very much the same thing. If there's a lot of uncertainty, the initial reaction is, ugh, it's got to be bad. And that's why you have that drop. And it wasn't helped by the fact that the information kept changing, the narrative kept changing, the policy kept changing. So that creates more and more and more uncertainty. Underlying all of this was the fact that the economic data itself, the hard data, was actually pretty dang good. And so when the market took a breather and looked back and said, oh, wait a minute, it's not something that's going to eat me. It's actually not that bad. Then you start to see this reaction back upward. There's still a lot of uncertainty around the tariffs. There's still a negotiation process. It's changing by the week at this point, and we still don't know the whole story. And so it is going to be an ongoing bit of uncertainty. But the things to keep in mind is that tariffs, while they got a lot of news, they're only one part of the economic story. Big underlying thing is, how is the consumer doing? All right, what is the other data showing us? And we had kind of a mixed bag in the beginning. The GDP number, which is gross domestic product, which is kind of a reflection of how our economy is doing, for the first quarter was actually not good. But the reason it's not good is, you break down the data, it's because so many companies were front running their imports in advance of the tariffs. Because, by the way, we all knew they were coming. It's not like it's a surprise. So a lot of companies, what they did is they said, well, we don't know what the tariffs are going to look like, so let's get as much stuff in as we can, as early as we can. But that created a massive imbalance in GDP numbers. Beyond that, the rest of the GDP didn't really look that bad. So it's more of a temporary one-off event rather than a harbinger of something more. Unemployment numbers are good. Consumer spending is great. A lot of the really important parts of economic data are actually pretty strong, and at this point are not showing any signs of weakening. That could change. So I just want to say where we are today as opposed to where we may be. At this point, it's tipping more towards growth will continue, with some surprises here and there, than it is something more is going to happen. Which is a little different than our presenters at last month's event, which had a little bit different take on the economy. And the reason I like to bring different views in, at least different views that I trust and know how they do things, not just random people. But the reason is people can look at data differently and have different ways to interpret it. But all of us say the same thing. We're as good as today's data. It could change tomorrow. Our job is to make sure that we change with it when necessary. So that's at the kind of the high level. What happened last month was very much lots of uncertainty, a lot going on, markets reacting. Also, the markets had a really big run since last fall, so they were due to correct anyway. That was just a great excuse to do it. This run up now is more data driven and a little bit more, I say a little bit more of optimism as we've gotten through first quarter earnings and company guidance. And what we're seeing is, for the most part, companies seem to be handling this pretty well. There are some, I would say some companies are a little more uncertain. There are a few companies that have pulled in their guidance and said, we're not prepared to guide. We don't know what this is going to look like. So this is definitely going to be a story of winners and losers as we're in this changing environment, because we are going through a trade transition. Whatever the final product is going to be, this is a trade transition, and it has a lot of impact on a lot of companies. Some will benefit significantly. There are a lot of companies and industries, especially domestic, that are very, very happy about this. And there's a lot of companies that are not so much so. Even with the uncertainty around it, there's still, you'll be winners and there will be losers. Excuse me. So that being said, sort of that high level, what the heck is going on? Really, as another one is the difference between hard data and soft data. So I'll give you an idea. Hard data is data. It's data it's either something that's happened. Generally, the data is a little bit more backwards looking. Most of it is, except for leading indicators, because it's going to be last month's unemployment report, last quarter's inflation numbers, for an example. But that's hard data. This is like what's really happening. Currently, and as we always do in times of greater uncertainty, we're now looking, at least at Sequoia, we're looking at weekly data. We're not going to wait for the official reports to come out. We're going to look, what are the consumers doing on a weekly basis? What do the credit card delinquencies look like on a weekly basis? What does real estate look like on a weekly basis? We're tracking it real time because we want to make sure the consumers don't slow down. We want to make sure that the unemployment numbers don't change as high frequency as possible, so we can kind of see the changes a little bit earlier on than the regular data. The hard data is showing a story of a stronger economy. The soft data is how people feel. And this has been something that's been going on for a while. So this is not really necessarily connected to the current administration. It's been going on for a while, for years now, where the economy is doing fairly well, but the consumer or the average person doesn't feel that way. So consumer sentiment is not as good as the economy. Why is there that disconnect? Number one, there's just a lot of news out there, and a lot of times the news can make people highly stressed, especially depending on their political views, their social views, their just how they see the world. A lot of news, a lot going on could sometimes make people feel less safe, less secure. When a news story comes out and says this bad thing is going to happen or might happen, it still is taken as news and is taken as reality, which creates fear. And that is something that I definitely think has an impact. The secondary thing is inflation, when it really started getting bad back in late 21 into 22, 22 is a big year. Inflation puts a lot of pressure on a lot of people, especially people on the lower end of the socioeconomic scale and people living on a fixed income. So let's just put it into two rough groups. Some people that just said, I don't like the idea this costs more when I go to the store, but they can afford it and they'll continue to purchase it. And another group of people that, this is really expensive, I'm not going to buy it, or I'm going to buy a lot less of it because I need to make choices every month to where my money goes. So inflation, when we started having it back in 22, hadn't really happened for, gosh, 25, 27 years, and probably even going back further, really. But the rapid rate that inflation hit really shocked a lot of people, because that feels more real than a bunch of government economic data, bunch of stuff I say, right? People are like, what are people looking at? Cost of everything they have to spend money on, cost of stuff they want to spend money on, and how's their portfolio doing, right? That's sort of like the economic indicators for the average person. So when you go to the store and everything's going up, and then you get your utility bill and it's doubled, and pretty much everything in your life is getting a lot more expensive, a lot faster, that in itself makes people feel like the economy's not doing well. So I want to bring that up, is that this has been going on for a while with that disconnect. And this was something that during the election kept coming up. People say, the economy's doing great. Why are people not happy? They're not happy because of the cost of living and other factors, of course. But I'm bringing up the economic elements to it. So back in 2022, we had the fastest inflation going up at the fastest rate since the 70s and early 80s, sorry, late 70s. We had the Federal Reserve raising interest rates in the fastest rate in history. We had a recession, 2 negative quarters of GDP, and most people didn't really notice. I mean, they noticed costs going up, right? But it wasn't really this devastating event. Oh my God, it's a recession, the end of the world, because all recessions are not like 2008. Sometimes they're mild. This was mild, and the reason it was mild, even though we had the inflation, even though we had high interest rates, even though we had a technical recession, right? Unemployment was low, most people were still working, and a lot of people could navigate through it. So it was 10 months of pain. Markets dropped almost 30%, but it was over in a relatively short period of time. So those are parts of the economy that are less impactful on people's lives than something that is prolonged. And that's why I'm going to bring up inflation now, because that's one of the big questions I've been getting. The inflation is, when is it going to go away? When is it going to end? And that's where I don't have such good news for you, because higher inflation is likely going to stay with us for a longer period of time. Now, when I say higher inflation, the Fed wants to see it at 2. We're just over that now, kind of hovering around 2.5, 2.7, right? Fed would like to get it lower so they can raise rates. It's kind of the world we're in. Fed's taking a pause right now because they don't want to act too quickly until they see what the impacts of tariffs are, how they see how the economy's going. Because if they cut rates too soon, it can actually lead to a much more difficult situation to control, because inflation will come roaring back, and the second time around, rate cuts don't help much. It's really hard to kill inflation when it gets entrenched at a high rate. So the Fed's being really cautious right now, and the economy has to get much weaker for them to really want to take those steps. That being said, we can just simply have static for the Fed to do a couple of test cuts. So later this year, there's a chance that the Fed will make a couple of small cuts just to test the waters and see how the economy reacts to it. But it won't be anytime soon. The soonest it would happen would be the second half of the year, most likely. And if it did, it's going to be very small, because again, economy's strong. Unemployment is very low. So that's, again, not an issue for them. And inflation is still a little bit above their comfort level. However, over time, it's likely the Fed's going to accept the fact that we are not going to get down to these incredibly low inflation rates that we had before the pandemic. They'll have to somewhat adapt to that. And that will change. And the biggest change at lower rates will be is obviously for savers, it's not as attractive. But for people that taking on debt, especially people purchasing a home with a mortgage, people purchasing a car with a loan, it's going to definitely make a big difference in the economy, kind of a little bit of a boost there. But yeah, and I would definitely agree with the Fed. Don't move too quick on that. As much as it'd be great for a lot of people and for the economy in some ways, it can create a lot more trouble down the road. So, I'm definitely in support of what Chairman Powell is doing at this time. Want to bring that up because that is another question I got a lot from people. So that being said, economy slowing doesn't equal economy recession. Economy recession, if it's mild and short, is not the end of the world and will give the Fed more room to move. The most important thing is that unemployment stays reasonably low. And that's a really big key. And we have not seen a meaningful move it. Yes, we've had been very high profile layoffs, especially with federal workers, but at this point it hasn't meaningfully changed the numbers. So most likely a lot of these people are finding other work at this time, either within the government or outside the government. So that's at this point good news. The tariff uncertainty is likely going to continue, but unlikely at the same level that we had last month, simply because these negotiations will take time. And we won't know a lot of the details because there's, I'm sure, going to be a lot of privacy and secrecy around any deals made to the level they can, from the standpoint of that they're negotiating with multiple different countries. The UK is the first one that's officially been done, and it seems like both sides are happy with the results there. So that will give us some time. Let's see. A couple questions that I got quite a bit was that are the consumers spending a lot now because they're trying to get ahead of the tariffs, right? So is that what's making the economy strong and consumer spending strong? That's somewhat was true, I said, in the corporate level or the company level, that pull forward in shipments, but also shipments take a long time, right? So you got to plan way ahead. And many of you probably know this, but the stuff that they need for Christmas is ordered in the spring. It just takes time to get the stuff here, get it made, get the stuff here, get it in storage, and get it to the right stores. So there has been some consumer pull forward, but at this point, it doesn't seem like it's been really meaningful at this point. That could change, like I said, if the tariffs actually hit. But think of it this way. Cost went up so much in 2022. And that was a shock to most people, right? It was like, bam, and all of a sudden it happened. There was not much that the consumer could do. They just had to kind of eat the price. So for the most part, it's going to be those very, very expensive items that are subject or at risk to tariffs. I have a number of clients that are starting construction projects right now with bids that they got from last year, early this year. And so far, none of the prices have changed for the construction. So that's somewhat of a good sign that they're not saying, oh, we got this big tariff, we got to pass it on to you. But again, time will tell how all this plays out. But that being said, the consumer pull forward, there has been, though, some interesting shifts, though, of companies moving manufacturing or moving their shipments out of China. We're seeing that with iPhones, that more of them are coming out of India now. So the iPhones coming out of China have plummeted, right? So there have been where companies have been able to pivot quickly. They are and have been moving operations. The tariffs with China was the only country that actually went on to the trade war, right? Where we put tariffs on them, they put tariffs on us, or more on them, and it became somewhat of an escalating situation. A lot of that has since been scaled back. But I bring this up because it's sort of really important because it's beyond tariffs. Sometimes people think, oh, it's like kind of like a Trump whim and he's just, doing all this stuff. But China, the issues we've had with China and trade are well before Trump's time in office, and they're longstanding and they're multifaceted. This has been talked about. This was concerns that Obama talked about, and he put tariffs and restrictions on China. Trump did it in his first term. Biden did it a number of times during his term, and then Trump again. The issues with China are more not so much, tariff related, but also things you all know, the piracy aspect, the stealing of technology, manipulation of currency, and the other one has been dumping, which putting products very, very, very cheap into the market, the global markets, and basically hitting the rest of their competitors and driving some of them out of business. So some of these less fair parts of the trade game have been issues well before Trump, and I think that's why there was a lot of focus on trying to curtail some of this activity. Whether or not that's successful, I have no idea, but that was where there was that big focus there. Chinese economy, though, is struggling greatly. They have a deflation problem, not an inflation problem, which is worse. There's a lot of issues going there. The demographics are turning sideways quickly. The one-child policy for so many years has really declined their birth rate significantly. And most developed economies need a growing population to support it. So China has a lot of internal things that they're going to be working on, which is also going to make them more willing to try to make sure they don't disrupt their economy more than necessary. And that may well be why this resolved, or at least somewhat resolved, a little sooner than it would have otherwise done. When you have two very strong-willed leaders butting heads, usually takes a bit longer than this. Let's see, I'm just making sure I'm covering all this. The spending aspect too is, you mentioned this a number of times before in these webinars, but 2/3 of the economy, around 70%, is consumer spending. The consumers are the linchpin. If they feel comfortable, if they have the financial will. So we not only look at unemployment, we also look at wages, and wages have been rising, which has helped to support that. The big part of it is that 50% of that 70% is people at the highest earning levels. So that makes sense, right? More disposable income, more spending. And that is, again, a really big driver. And I'll talk a little bit about the tax policy coming out in a minute here, but that may change some of that depending on what the results of that. I mentioned, yeah, credit card delinquencies declining. So that's, none of these things have been a really big issue. In the financial world, company earnings were basically done with Q1 right now. For the most part, companies are hitting their numbers or higher. So the beats are actually up. We're not seeing any really big concerns there. Again, collectively, no different than we would have in any other earnings season in a growing economy. So nothing's really come up there that's been significant. Let's see, the other question I have, I'm again going through like the high level questions that we have a lot, is about the Moody's downgrade of the US debt, which happened this week. Obviously never a good thing, but also a surprise to no one. So the top 3 credit rating agencies, reputations have gotten hit significantly since the financial crisis. However, they still are doing their job and trying to do ratings. So back in, I want to say 2010 or 11, I can't remember which one, the first rating agency, S&P, downgraded US debt. That was during Obama's presidency. He said almost exactly the same thing that the Trump administration is saying now. Wow, don't listen to them, they don't know what they're talking about. Politicians tend to, obviously, if they're in charge, tend to to sort of, in a way, push this off and make it into not a big deal. This is a surprise to no one. I mean, obviously, we're 36 point something trillion in debt. This is a not an unknown issue. The biggest question that we're running into with a lot of this is going to really come down to what are we going to do about it, right? And we have a lot of room because we are the world's most powerful economic superpower. We are the world's, what they call apex military power. We can get away with things that most countries can't, but the issue of our debt is going to need to be resolved at some point or another. There's only really 2 ways of doing it: paying it off or growing our economy so fast that we can make it be less of an issue. So there's different ways, different, people in office have different viewpoints on this, different economists have different viewpoints on this. But at this point, it's such a high number that the solutions for our debt are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, because what I call the elephant in the room is most of our spending is stuff that nobody wants to touch. And as much as Trump is comfortable going out there and breaking things, for lack of a better term, and making big changes, he's very aware of the importance of these main programs, the entitlement programs, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, and only looking for reducing areas that are outside of the traditional scope of these, not taking away benefits directly. Now, again, all these things can always change, but that's the big chunk of our spending. So the focus in the current administration is we're going to grow our way out of this. Okay, they believe that we can solve the problem if we can just take away the constraints that the economy has to grow, in their view, and grow. And we're just going to grow our way out of this, which is quite possibly would work. We don't know yet, right? So I'm not going to sit here and say it won't work or will work, but it takes a lot. It'll take a lot of growth. It will take a lot of changes. Their ideas of the changes are cutting regulations, to kind of free up businesses, not eliminating regulations, of course, but cutting back regulations, lowering taxes to the degree possible, though in the current iteration of that, there's not a lot of that happening. And do things that are stimulative to the economy, and you're hearing a lot of these policies. Whether it will work or not, only time will tell. There's a lot of opinions out there, but I will tell you, as an economist and as someone that's going to be honest with you, nobody knows it'll be successful or not. If successful, it could actually provide a tremendous amount of growth. It could help knock down some of the biggest levels of debt and create more efficiencies. If unsuccessful, it will create a lot more debt and a lot more, I don't call it inefficiencies per se, but focus on areas that aren't really the most productive. So that is something that we're going to have to watch and wait over time. Like I said, it's there's a lot of views on this from the political standpoint, but economically, we just really have to wait and see if this will happen. The US economy naturally wants to grow. It's its natural state is growth. And so as long as we don't create a bubble or a distortion that will lead to a worse outcome, then the growth is a path to look at. Because the other solutions, the idea that we're going to raise taxes on the wealthy or anyone else, that ship sailed. Another thing, I'm just going to be real honest with you on this because I'm pretty good at math. We don't have enough rich people with enough money to pay off $36 trillion in debt, not even pay off a fraction of that. We just don't. So we can't tax the wealthy to solve the problem. I'm not saying that taxes don't go up, but that's not going to solve the issue. It's going to be more of a partisan talking point or political talking point than it's going to be actually a really effect on it. We would get a lot more money if we can grow the economy just by numbers. Just by numbers. And again, by the way, I'm not saying taxes shouldn't go up or down or sideways from the what I call socioeconomic standpoint or the I guess populist standpoint. From the economic standpoint, it's just not enough money. I will touch briefly, just very briefly, on whatever the heck it's called, Big Beautiful Bill. I don't know if that's its official name or that's just what they call it right now. But the many of you might probably know from listening to me from before, the current tax law, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, expires at the end of this year. So Congress needs to come up with the new tax laws. Right? This will just expire. So if they don't come up with anything new and they can't pass it, we revert back to the tax policy that we had pre-2017. Based on the IRS calculations, that's going to be a tax increase for most of the nation. Most of the tax-paying nation across the board. I can go into the details of why, but from where you are today, if you're earning more than $48,000 a year, your taxes will go up if it just reverts with no change. This is the IRS, by the way. This is not me. I didn't go and calculate that myself. So that being said, most people want to see some kind of reform or some kind of change, some kind of adjustment. This is what the politicians are really, really not so good at sometimes, is figuring out how they can get something passed, but also get something done. Because by the time it gets negotiated to the point that everybody agrees on, it's usually not as strong as it was originally, right? Because there's a little bit of give and take. Under a current environment that we're in, my expectation, and I could be wrong because it's not finalized yet, that it's going to be 100% having to be Republicans, because the Democrats, I don't think, are going to vote for anything that's Trump wants at this point. That could change, and that's going to be kind of a hard sell for a lot of Democrats, especially moderate Democrats or moderate states. From the standpoint is there's a lot of populist things in there. No taxes on senior Social Security, no taxes on tips. A few other potential tax things there that are very popular. And so that's going to be a little bit of it. However, we're just in that political environment right now where it's kind of like everyone sort of more on their side only. So the Republicans need to get all the Republicans on their side to pass this. And the Republicans are not just a homogenous group. There's the fiscal hawks. They're like, more cuts. And there's a moderates going, no, I can't sell this to my district, which is always the case in Washington. So we don't know what the final bill is going to look like, and I'm going to save this for, sorry, just I don't lose this page. I'm going to save this for when we know more. We actually know more of what's going to pass and what's not going to pass. But some big things to watch that are sort of cool on the economic front is there's a plan that they're going to put in place to help people save for their kids' future. It's almost like a hybrid of a 401k or a 529 for kids when they're born. It's almost like a Roth structure, and the government's going to seed it with money, and then you or any family member or anyone you like or anyone you can convince to put money in it, puts money in it, grows. So kind of a lot like, again, a hybrid between a 401k and a 529. Current proposal is, I believe, at 25, the kids can get half of it, and at 30, they can take all of it. So anyway, that was a really cool thing, because that really one thing that we really don't have in this dialed in this country as well as I would love to see is savings, and people having enough savings to get in the habit of savings, especially at a young age. So this could be a really cool feature. We don't know all the details yet, but that is a proposal that's there. Sticking point right now is salt. Okay, so salt is a big sticking point for those of you who aren't familiar with it. State and local tax deduction is really, really a popular thing, especially for people in high tax states, California, New York, etc. And it's the ability to deduct your state taxes against your federal taxes, reduce your overall tax burden. So with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, that got capped at $10,000, which was a big hit for a lot of people. Again, the high tax states, especially higher earners, middle class to higher earners, got impact. Anybody that was not using a standard deduction lost on that. So that was a really big sort of political thing. And this is something interesting where the Democrats and Republicans in these states are actually somewhat aligned. That they would like to see that cap raised significantly or eliminated altogether. However, the more you raise the cap or eliminate it, that means the government gets less money. And that's the whole idea of this, is the government's getting more funding. So this is a little bit of a horse trading going on right now with what that should look like. The debate for a long time has been, you know, by some people, why should the low tax states be subsidizing the high tax states? And essentially they are. The high tax states come back and say, well, we're the biggest economies, we're giving more money to the government than we're getting back. And the honestly with that is, it just depends how you manipulate the data. You can see it from whatever way you want to see it. It's all has some truth to it. But it is a big sticking point, especially again with the lower tax states that are not going to benefit from this as much. So that's where we are today. I'm pretty sure we're going to get some form of tax reform, and it's going to pass. We just don't quite know what it looks like yet. One thing to know, Katie and I are watching this very closely, and anything that passes that has an impact on any of you, dear clients, we're going to let you know right away. So you can plan for it, we can add it to your plan, etc. So we'll be on top of it. But right now it's more watching than it is planning, because we're too early in the process until this gets to the main vote level. See, I'll touch on a couple of other things, and then I'll hop over to questions. But those were trying to go through all the biggest questions that I had. Okay, all right. So I'm going to go to questions then. So send them on in, and I'm going to jump back and forth between the pre-sent in questions. And then I'll close out with a couple of things just for your consideration. Let's see. How is Trump's fight with the courts affecting the economy? No real impact at this point. And the giant caveat is you're here to hear about economics. There's plenty of sources that will talk about a lot of the other social stuff, so I don't really pull that in, or the political stuff, because I just know there's a lot of ways of seeing the world. But that being said, yeah, the fight with the courts that he's having is not really having economic impact. Where there could be a potential economic impact would be something where there was a policy that he put in place. I'm going to say has an economic component, and the courts rule against it, and that became a fight back and forth, and that may create some level of uncertainty depending on what that is, or disruption, especially if it took effect immediately, then it got pulled away, right? Court said, Trump said yes, court said no. So his direct fights with them at this point, not an economic impact, potentially could be. However, this is no different than any other president. When the Biden administration, he threw out some executive orders that were really had a big economic impact. I think economic impact he and his administration didn't really understand at the time, because it sounded good, but the devil was in the details. So this happens, it's not uncommon with any administration, because presidents are not economists. It's just the reality of it, right? They're there to do what they feel is the best for the country. This is a great, thank you. This is a great information. Thank you. Can I send this recording to a friend? Yes, please send these out. Please share with other people. If it helps people understand the world, and it helps people feel a bit maybe better and secure, please send it out. Please share it. There's a very specific reason that you don't hear me talking about all the great things Sequoia does and our blah, 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 because I don't want this to come across as a marketing exercise. I want this to come across as useful information you can use and share with others, with all the rest of that. If people want to talk about any of the rest of it, or want to learn more about Sequoia and what we do, they can reach out, I'll have that conversation. But these things are going to be always high level and useful. So please share it. With my other caveat, this is May 20th, 2025, subject to change tomorrow. That's where we stand today based on data. Safest retirement portfolio, question mark. That depends on you. So there's different levels of safety. So a lot of times you think of safety in a portfolio of it's not going to go down, right? If the economy tanks or the markets tank, it's not going to go down. But there's another risk that's a little bit more insidious, which is inflation. Okay. So let's say you're saying, I don't want any risk. I'm putting my money in a bank. Okay. And now at least you're getting a little interest on that. It used to be didn't get that at all. You're putting my money in a bank. Okay. Inflation is going up this fast and your interest is going up this fast. You are losing money. And that's the reality of it. It's rare that interest rates are higher than inflation. And by the way, it's not the official number of inflation. It is your personal inflation. If you're not earning enough on that money, your money's losing purchasing power. So go to the grocery store. Imagine you went to the grocery store in 2021, right? In the middle of the pandemic, get your mask on, you're in the grocery store, you're shopping. And let's say you had $100 to spend in the grocery store. And what you could put in your cart in 2021 and what you could put in your cart today for that same $100 is a whole lot less, right? So your money, while safe, right? That money in the bank didn't go down, it stayed stable, but it doesn't have nearly as much value to you today as it did just a couple years back, right? So I want to talk about that risk too, not just portfolio risk. So it's really important to understand that's why buckets make sense. Because money in the market, and again, not saying this is what anybody should do, because everybody should do different things, individual. Money in the market, while it does this, 2/3 of the time historically it's going up, 1/3 of the time it's going down. But over time, it beats inflation, historically. So that's why money you don't need in the short term, putting it in some form of growth, be it real estate, be it a stock market, be it other types of investments, can help offset the insidious loss that you'll get from inflation. There are other types of investments that are out there, and all of them have what I call their pros and cons. There are annuities, right? There's life insurance. There's, obviously, stocks. There's tax-free bonds, which are very, very popular right now, especially for my Californians, right? Very popular because you get all the same thing, you don't have to pay taxes on it. And it's a pretty conservative investment. So what you do with your money depends on your specific situation and when you need the money, like how soon you need it, right? Because that bucket's going to be more conservative, and what other things you have going on. Give another example. Sorry, it was a long answer to your simple question. If you have a pension, a defined pension, right? If you have Social Security, you have this guaranteed money coming in for the rest of your life that will reset for inflation. You might have more room to let more of your money grow or have more of your money locked or something like that, right? Because you've got this floor of guarantee in your life. If you have all of your money in a 401k or an IRA, and if you have little to no Social Security, or the Social Security you have won't really meet much of your needs, then you need to think about your buckets a little differently. What are your commitments or obligations? What are your necessities that you have to pay for? Many of my clients, it's not just their needs, they're also supporting family members, right? So you have to think about what is the way that I don't want to miss a bill, I don't want to miss a payment, I need to make sure this money is secure. So this is highly individualized, and this is where I'm going to a little bit talk about what we do, but we're not the only ones that do this. So financial planning is really important because you can define what makes the most sense for you and with all your buckets of money and how to allocate those buckets of money and the pros and cons to it. Because layered on top of what's most optimal, the highest probability of reaching your goals is what we seek to do. We don't need to beat the stock market. We don't need to hit some crazy number. We just want the highest probability that you're going to reach your goals with the least amount of risk. It's that simple. And that's all the modeling we do. And it's all individualized because it depends what else is going on. And that's ultimately what you want. So you don't have to worry about, will I have enough? Right? You can take a lot of that worry away. Will I have enough? So I hope it was useful. If not, ask another questions, put it out there, and I'll make sure to answer it. Is Tesla a good investment? Oh boy, the Tesla question. It depends. The regulations do not allow me to make investment advice or recommendations on a call like this, right, with an audience. So I'll say this: it depends. It depends on as I talked before, your specific situation, what else you have going on, your comfort level with risk, etc. So I'll break Tesla down just a little bit. Tesla stock has been notoriously volatile since it came out. Tesla almost went bankrupt twice, okay, in its lifespan back in the day. So Tesla stock has notoriously been incredibly volatile stock, moves a lot up and down. In recent months, we've had the added element of the political, and that is with Elon Musk switching from a more liberal viewpoint to a supporter of the Donald Trump administration, his policies, and then taking on the role in Doge. which is everyone I think knows what that is at this point. So there was a reaction to that. There was an initial reaction to the stock of like, oh, you know, his company's going to do well. He's, you know, Trump's coming into office and he's aligned with him and he's going to do well, which I always thought was a little weird because there was just no correlation between that. Since Trump's not like, hey, everybody buy a EV kind of guy. So there was that sort of initial boost to the stock, and just the overall stock market was doing well as well. And then there was sort of that counter reaction when Doge started making cuts and people got upset with it. And the idea was, you know, this is not the car to buy for people that felt that way. So there's sort of that counter reaction. Since then, the stock's recovered significantly because it's kind of coming back more to how is the company doing. EV sales are down overall across the board, not Tesla specific. But Tesla's value is in its data and in its technology. And that's going to be far, far more valuable than any cars that they produce and create. And that's kind of what the markets are looking at. So the idea of it is, I hope that was kind of like a high level. It's not a recommendation to buy it or to sell it. Like with anything else, it depends, you know, if you have a very strong political or social belief and you wish not to own it, don't own it. If you have a very strong political or social belief to own it, own it. And overall, if you're not owning it just for those reasons, it's really how would it fit in your overall plan and how would it fit in your overall portfolio. Good news is there's lots of different companies out there that you can own. So that's the high level Tesla thing. Okay, let's see, next one here. And again, if more questions come in over here, I got 3 screens open here for questions. Can you talk about the impact of AI on jobs? What about education and other sectors? AI is huge. I'll probably have our team come out and talk about it in an upcoming webinar. They're really good, better at it than I am. I can tell you that it's definitely going to be a big game changer in a lot of ways. And it's certainly going to change our society, and it's certainly going to change how we work and how we do things. In our world, you know, what we're seeing within companies is a massive productivity gain. We are seeing some initial layoffs around that with some of the tech companies. It's not to a large scale at this point. It's more where they need a lot of people to do something. Now they need less. Will this spread? Will these people find other jobs? How will this shift our society, and how will it shift the job market? It's a little too soon to tell. We can look back at the dot-com boom as an example of, you know, how a lot of booksellers and bookstores went out of business because people could order the things on Amazon. That continues to this day. However, people just found different jobs. When the automobile became the replacement for the horse, right? You know, people that were, you know, running the stables and building harnesses for the horses, they found other jobs. As we have these shifts, people get retrained, repurposed, and find other jobs. The speed of this may make it more disruptive though, because it's not going to be a slow change necessarily. It could be a quick change. So there's positives economically, a lot of positives to it, but there's also the societal element that's too soon to tell. There's a lot of theories out there and a lot of ideas, and a lot of people know a whole lot more about than I do. I can say from a productivity standpoint, it has been a game changer for me. I get to spend a whole lot more time talking to you, dear clients, than I did before, because I can use it to scour through earnings reports and things like that. And our industry is highly regulated. So we have a hard, like, you cannot use AI with anything to do with a client's name or account or anything like that. So just because of the fact it's all out there in the world, it's more from an efficiency standpoint internally than it's ever been for anything else. So we'll just see again how this goes over time. But I'll get some really good speakers that can really talk at length. If you guys remember our live event 2 years or 3 years or so ago, First Trust guy was talking about AI, and we had just started, you know, getting into that space, and a lot of the audience was like, "What the heck is that?" We're like, "Go home, download ChatGPT, play with it." And the response was, "Oh my gosh!" It was scary back then, and it is getting so smart so quickly. I've been using ChatGPT 4 since it came out, and it's stunning how much smarter it's getting. It's a little disconcerting sometimes, definitely. Let's see here. And then, education, sorry. Yeah, education, that would be something where it's pretty fascinating, the little bits I've seen. And again, this would be great to have, to get from an educator, okay? Get from a teacher that's teaching it, say the high school or middle school level or college level or university professors, to see how this is really changing everything. Because I've seen clips of professors just feeling like lost and useless and confused, and all the ways they had students do things before, you know, they can just do it with AI. There's not the same, learning is changing. Education is going to change significantly. How much do people have to learn if everything is available at your fingertips? Far more information than the smartest professor is going to have. So this, I think education is actually one of the areas I think is going to change the most with all of this. How, I don't know. And certainly I don't think all the kids are just going to stay home and virtually learn. That didn't work out too well in the pandemic because there was a lot of social developmental impacts to that. So how schools will look in the future, to pull all that together, right? The social element, the in-person element, and then the virtual element and the AI. Again, be fascinating to hear some of the ideas from people that are in the education area, because that's not a space I'm an expert in. But just think about all the information in the world is constantly getting smarter by the moment. No human is going to be able to keep up with that. The value of a professor, and with all respect to professor or any other profession, will go away. In many cases, the knowledge will go away. The ability to translate the knowledge to a benefit to humanity or a human or a group of people or an industry or students is going to be where it's at, right? Just as I'm taking a lot of data and bringing it to you, that's the value is going to be that human element. Hopefully the robots won't take that away from us. What's the economic effects of the DOGE cuts and programs being eliminated? Too soon to tell. At this point, even despite all of the news and despite the impacts it's had, and despite these really big slices that have been taken out of the government, economically, not so much. With all respect to government workers and the government itself, it's not an engine of productivity in our economy. So it's not really having economic impact. If you had wide scale, massive, much greater than anything that's been proposed so far, layoffs, it would certainly, because you're putting a lot more people into the workforce or a lot more people unemployed. But economically at this point, it hasn't had a meaningful impact. Nationally, the communities around Washington, D.C. have been hit pretty hard, because that's kind of ground zero for this, right? Kind of ground zero. But initially the impact was, oh my gosh, all these people are gonna lose their jobs, housing prices dropped, it was really disruptive to the local economies. But then another funny thing happened. All those remote people that were working remotely in the government had to come back and be in the office. So far it's been really disruptive, but there hasn't been a big economic impact. Time will tell, like I said, how far this goes. And I want to break the Doge thing down a bit, because there's some things have been said, that's a Doge thing. It wasn't actually a Doge thing. It was a Trump thing or an administration thing. And something had been Doge thing. But the idea of Doge is cutting out, let's see if I get this right, waste, inefficiency, and fraud. I think I have that correct. So you have to understand there's three elements here. Fraud, I think we can all agree, is bad, and that should go away. Like, that's bipartisan, I believe. If there's anything that's bipartisan anymore, that's bipartisan. Fraud, bad, done. The people who are committing the fraud should be prosecuted, right? Waste and inefficiency, inefficiency. Oh, the next one is like, can we do this better? Do we need this many people to do this one thing? Can we invest in technology? If Amazon can process God knows how many billions of transactions every day, do we need this many layers of people doing things by hand and by paper with old technology? Efficiency is an investment, right? It's going to cost some money. You got to spend some money to get the efficiencies created to be able to do this, right? So good thing for everyone. There'll be less workers needed. So yes, there'll be layoffs or reassignment of people. But efficiency is a good thing, right? It's efficient. We're just keeping up with technological changes. The government tends to be the slowest one to do it. It is true that there are departments within the federal government that are still doing things by hand. Like it just needs to be upgraded, but they need to get the funding and they need to have the technological knowledge to be able to do that. But the other one that's a little more mysterious is when we talk about waste, because waste is very subjective. One person's waste is another person's essential program. All right. Sometimes there's a headline, oh, this program does this important thing for starving children. And then you look at the program and 20% of the money is actually going to the starving children. The rest is going to bureaucracy or some consultant or something. So there's a little bit of that kind of like shining a light in it and saying, is this really serving the public? Can we merge multiple groups together to create something that's more sustainable and better over time? But people want to defend their territory, I guess, for lack of a better term. So I'm not here to say Doge is a good thing or Doge is a bad thing. Like any other tool, it's how it's used. There will always be, anytime the government does anything, there's going to be winners and losers in there. I think the most important thing with it of all is compassion and empathy for the disruption that you're creating, as well as transparency and openness so people can see what the heck is going on is helpful to that. Again, a little bit out of the economic, but it does have an economic impact potentially, because anyone who's paying taxes probably wants to be sure that that money's being spent efficiently, right? And it's not subject to fraud. So I think we can probably all agree on. The differences is what programs should be funded and not funded. Okay, sorry to waste my time here. Is a long-term care insurance a good idea? That also depends. And that is something where there's a lot of different ways to fund long-term care needs or potential long-term care needs for yourself or for family members. This is something that's really helpful to talk to a financial planner about. And I want to talk about that because a lot of questions around insurance and Social Security and investments, things like that. The reason to talk to a planner is a planner, a good planner will charge a fee, not for the consultation. Usually that's not a cost. They'll charge a fee to do some planning for you, as we do. But there's no incentive or compensation for selling you a product. That's important, right? Because if, I'm not saying that people who sell long-term care insurance are bad people or they would be selling something that's inappropriate or unneeded. It is that it's good when you're making an investment in something, especially something where there's a high cost over a long period of time, that you are looking at all the options and you're getting a kind of a 10,000-foot view of what option would fit best in your life. And in addition to that, there's not that conflict of interest. So I would say if you're considering long-term care insurance, do consider talking to a financial planner, to us or to another. Certified financial planner working on a fee basis is a good idea because, again, there's not that conflict. Because there's a lot of different ways to fund long-term care, so not necessarily through a traditional insurance policy. Let's see. And that actually comes, the other question was here, are annuities a good investment? Same thing. Planning will answer that for you, because there's rarely good and bad investments outside of fraudulent ones. It's really, is it right for you and your specific situation? And annuities have their place for certain people in certain plans, certain situations. They're not for everything. And there's definitely considerations you want to understand how they work, because there's a lot of considerations with those. Do I really need a trust? What are the other options? There are a lot of different ways to do planning, life planning. A trust is one of them. There's a lot of really good and valid reasons to have a trust. However, and again, I'm not here to give you legal advice because I technically cannot do that. Just to say that it depends on what you're trying to accomplish and what your financial situation looks like. And a good planner will also help with this, because they're going to tell you the pros and cons based on your situation, everything going on. What would be the benefits of a trust for you, and where would you not necessarily need to have one, or where would be a situation where you could do it a different way. I will say that having this done in some form or another, again, be it trust or another fashion, having your planning done is really, really important, because I do estate settlement and I sit with a lot of families, and I can't tell you the difference between when everything is well organized and there's a clear plan and people know where everything is and everything's written out. It's in a time of grieving and a time of great stress for the family, whether it was an expected situation or unexpected situation, it's a whole different experience than when it's a mess. Nobody knows anything, where anything is. In the old days, we used to say, if someone passes away, just collect the mail for a year, you'll know where everything is. Nowadays, a lot of things are electronic. People have gotten rid of paper statements, paper for their investments or for their banks or anything else. So if you don't have the password, you may not even know these things exist. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. In addition to a trust, there's a really wonderful book. If anyone wants it, I will send it to you, called The Family Love Letter. And it's a great way of just kind of notating not only the technical, right? The trust is going to say who gets what, how this all works, beneficiaries on your retirement accounts, etc. But this gives an opportunity not only to tell people where stuff is, where to get the passwords, blah, 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 but it also gives you an opportunity to put a little bit of a story of why. Okay, so if your situation is one which you're thinking, well, I'm gonna, I want to give some money to this person that I knew that I really think could benefit from it, or something I own they really loved, I want them to have it. Maybe your family could go, why didn't I get that? Right? And in your mind, you're like, well, this person really wanted it and it was really important, and it was less important to you, so I want them to have it because it's my belief, right? I really think this is the right place for it to go. But if you write that down, it's really nice, because when you're gone, nobody can ask you anymore why. And sometimes that can create tensions because people sometimes will think the worst, right? Oh, she didn't love me as much, or, this and this and this. So writing the whys is kind of cool. And again, this is secure. You can lock it in a secure place and nobody will see it until the day you wish to share it. But it's a really cool book. So if you want it, respond to the link, respond to me personally. If you have my email, respond to Mia, Caitlin, whomever, and just say, send me the family love letter and we will send it out to you. If you want extra copies for your friends or family or something like that, you know why I'm doing this? These cost us money. I know it's not like a free thing I have. Why I'm doing it? Because every single person that fills this out is going to make life easier beyond their life, which may or may not make my job easier, but someone's job is going to be easier. And it's actually somewhat of a fun process to organize. So sorry, I just bring in that family love letter up there. Okay, final question here. I think I already talked about that. What will control inflation? So I think I've covered the big questions from today, unless anything else pops up. And I got about 5 minutes left. So if no other questions come in, I just wanted to touch upon next month's webinar. Next month's webinar, we have a guest speaker, Joanne Finley from ACM. She is an excellent portfolio manager. I've known her for years. There's not a lot of us women portfolio managers out there still, even in this day. So we just naturally connected to one another. She's a geek, I'm a geek, and she really has a great story of why. We work a lot with ACM and sourcing stocks for our clients and doing equity research and whatnot. And one thing about me, I have very high standards in the people that I work with on my clients' portfolios, very high. I have a small little group of trusted people that, or companies, I'll say, hey, I'm bringing you in on this because I need some extra resources. ACM is one of them. So she's really great to hear, kind of get a lot of idea of the economic, but also some little bit of storytelling in there. So she's going to be the special speaker for next month's webinar. And a final thing on all of this is, I talk about the economy, I talk what's going on. It's a lot of information, a lot of news. It's constantly changing. The one thing to keep in mind, and the most important, if you listen to nothing else in today's webinar and you listen to the last 5 minutes only, is this: all the decisions that you make around your choices, around the economy, around your investing, around your financial planning, around your taxes, insurance, or anything else, all of it has one purpose. And that purpose is the highest probability of achieving your goals with the least amount of risk. That's it. It's easy to get tied into what's the best investment, what's the best insurance product, how do I do my taxes, this way or this way. It's all comes down to your plan and your goal, to the best of your ability to know it today. Because obviously a plan's changing because life changes. Sometimes life changes because great opportunity comes and all of a sudden someone's financial picture looks different. Other times, sadly, there's a terminal diagnosis or a surprise death of a loved one or a loss of a job. Life is not certain and life is constantly changing. So the plan is giving you that North Star. That is what is most important and most valuable to me and my family and those I serve. And everything is built around it. Your investments, your insurance, your tax strategy, the entirety of that's built. And the reason that's important is because each time that you look at that decision, what do I do with my money? Am I in the right place? Should I do something different? It's always going to be, what is the highest probability I'm going to achieve that North Star? And that North Star is just that. The actual thing it is will change. Obviously, if your health changes, that will change what's most important right now. It doesn't change the North Star. The highest probability, the least amount of risk to meeting the needs and goals of myself and those I care for. Community, family, self, wherever that may be. And that actually clarifies a lot of decision making. Oftentimes in taxes, I'll say, hey, you know what? For years, we've done this strategy to minimize your taxes as much as legally possible, but this year we're going to pay a lot more in taxes. And they go, why? Why would I do that? I said, because you're going to get to the goal faster with more certainty if we can take one hit 1 year. Okay, now that makes sense, right? But if you didn't know that and you're just paying a lot in taxes, you could feel like I'm losing money and I have no plan and strategy. So always keep that in mind. All of these tie to that. That's the most important thing. So whether you work with us or you're doing this on your own, know that North Star. Everything balances around it. And that's I really wanted to share because I didn't want this to be almost like a ping pong game of where do I invest or what do I do? The world's getting crazy right now and changing. And every time Kristina talks, she's got new news and new information. Always comes down to that. And again, if for those of you who are clients of ours at Sequoia, I want to express my extreme and deeply heartfelt gratitude, not only your trust and confidence in us, that 100% of you held the course last month and trusted. Nobody panicked, nobody cashed out. And maybe you weren't feeling too comfortable. I get that. The news was really scary, but you trust in us. We're watching, so you don't have to worry about it. Go outside, do the stuff you love, enjoy the things that bring you joy, and we'll keep an eye on the rest of it for you. Always reach out anytime you have questions. That's the most important thing. We don't like to be a pest. I mean, we will never stop and reach out because, you know, I'm going to be making a lot of changes, and I think you might be curious. So our rule is this: we don't reach out regularly and talk to you a lot about the economy, what's going on, because that's sort of our job, and we really want you to have the freedom to live and enjoy your life and what's important. We're always going to make ourselves available. So questions, reach out. That being said, thank you so much for listening today. I hope this was all helpful to everyone and useful and interesting and informative. More questions come up, again, reach out, and I'll see you again next month, if not sooner. Okay, so bye for now.